8 Hawaiian honeycreeper species wiped from the face of the earth. Record heat waves drive thousands of deaths. Hurricane Otis killing hundreds. And soil degradation is at an all-time high. A crisis at the scale this world has never seen is no longer at our doorstep. It's now crashing through the threshold and threatening to pull us down into climate chaos. And our current political and economic solutions just aren't measuring up to the scale of this crisis. We need to chart a new path forward. One that heals the vast gulf that is opened up between humanity and nature. We need eco-socialism. But what exactly does that mean? Why is eco-socialism the answer? Today we dive into the inner workings of eco-socialism in order to uncover why socialism is necessary to avoid planetary disaster, what linear programming has to do with rewilding, why Cuba could unlock answers to cutting emissions, and why this diagram is crucial to healing our connection with the planet. This video is better on Nebula. Use the link in the description below or stick around until the end to find out how to support our changing climate directly by signing up for Nebula. There, you can watch this video ad-free and also watch over 25 OCC videos that I haven't released on YouTube, including my most recent bonus video on the ecological impact of Soviet planning, as well as an hour and 20-minute interview with the authors of Half-Earth Socialism. Soil is the foundation of life, a vibrant ecosystem teeming with organisms upon which humanity has built their success. Agronomists know this, farmers know this, and yet this knowledge seems to be forgotten here, in the barren fields of Minnesota's corn farms. Monocultures of corn and soybean rip the soil clean of organic matter and nutrients, demanding increasing amounts of fertilizer and pesticides to maintain yields. But farms like this aren't outliers. They're commonplace worldwide. Declining soil health is one of the many alarm bells signaling that our planet is on the brink of ecological collapse. And behind it all lies capitalism. Under capitalism, human labor transforms nature extensively in the pursuit of profit and capital accumulation. This relentless quest of transforming nature into marketable goods disrupts the cycle of production and reproduction in nature, or in other words, nature's metabolism. As Marx writes in the first volume of Capital, all progress in capitalist agriculture is a progress in the art not only of robbing the worker, but of robbing the soil. So the degradation of soil health across the world isn't a symptom of human nature. It's instead driven by the rampant hunger of capitalism. Throughout history, there has always been a metabolic interaction between humans and their natural environments. Whether through gathering or cultivation, we have worked the land to sustain ourselves. Up until the capitalist mode of production, however, that which we extracted has been replenished, whether through manure, food scraps, or clothing made from natural materials. Consequently, ecosystems, while certainly disturbed, were never shattered. However, capitalist production smashed this metabolic cycle. It privatized common land, forcing peasants from farms into the city. Survival was no longer based on how well you tended to the land and grew food, but instead how big your wages were. Food was thus grown in the countryside and sold and shipped via markets to sustain growing urban populations now working under a capitalist wage labor system. In this process, capitalist production prevents the return of the soil of its constituent elements consumed by man in the form of food and clothing. Hence, it hinders the operation of the eternal natural condition for the lasting fertility of the soil. In essence, the fundamental workings of capitalism directly contradict the regenerative processes of nature. This is what eco-socialist scholar John Bellamy Foster calls the Metabolic Rift. Capitalist production continuously extracts minerals, nutrients, and organic matter from the earth, transforming them into commodities for profit, and never completes the cycle by returning those extracted materials to the soil. This perpetual extraction without replenishment represents one of the fundamental contradictions of capitalism, and is part of the reason why we're experiencing climate chaos right now. So we need a new economic system, one that prioritizes the well-being of humanity and nature over the accumulation of profits and capital. And that system is eco-socialism. In 2020, the world needed to cut emissions by 7.6% every year in order to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. That same year, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. state actors mobilized massive plans to halt the spread of disease, which also happened to grind the economy to a halt. And yet global emissions only fell by 5.4%, only to then quickly rebound as production kicked into high gear a year later. The pandemic lays bare the destruction and incompetence of our global capitalist economy. It reveals that even extreme austerity and forced consumption cuts under capitalism will never be enough to stave off the worst of climate chaos. Capitalism cannot stop the climate crisis. It cannot dismantle the fossil fuel industry, nor can it halt the sixth mass extinction. It can't do these things because it is the core driver of all of these crises. But as much as we can recognize the growing rift between human and nature born out of capitalism, critiquing the present is not enough. We must envision a beautiful and realistic future, one that excites us and helps fuel the fire of transition. As environmental historian and author of Half-Earth Socialism, Troy Vitesse argues,
that having this utopia, this end goal, is very useful because that actually glues together your coalition. That actually binds you together.
Ecosocialism might just offer that powerful vision that glues us all together. It calls for a worker and peasant-led revolution that rips the ownership of production away from the elite and puts decision-making power into the hands of the masses. Unlike capitalism, which prioritizes decisions based on the endless creation of products to sell for more profit, ecosocialism advocates for an economy that makes decisions based on the well-being of all people and the planet. But what makes ecosocialism ecological? Most of these ideas of worker-led planning is well within the bounds of many socialist goals and visions. Admittedly, as Victor Wallace notes,
it's even redundant to put the eco prefix onto it because socialism implies that you make decisions on the basis of what's in the interests of people, and you can't legislate in the interest of people without taking into account the environment.
So while socialist goals often align with ecological concerns, eco-socialism specifically emphasizes a democratically planned economy based on social and ecological constraints. Planning is crucial not only for the ethical redistribution of wealth and knowledge sharing, but also for living harmoniously within our natural environments. History, though, teaches us that there are many pitfalls in the planning process, especially when it comes to environmental concerns. Just because you are striving for socialism, like in the case of the Soviet Union, doesn't necessarily mean that you will achieve ecological sustainability. And if you're interested in learning more about Soviet planning, I've uploaded a whole companion video to this one on Nebula, examining the environmental faults and successes of Soviet planning. These past and present examples of the various forms of socialism show us that ecology, whether species extinction or climate change or ocean acidification, all need to be foregrounded in the planning process if we are to avoid ecological destruction. If left out of the picture, socialist planning could very well drive us down the path of heavy industrial fossil fuel use. So ecological planning is essential, because capitalism, with its market-driven anarchy, fails to account for ecological sustainability in any meaningful way.
Capitalism has already failed, as in capitalism is not going to get us out of this mess. We've been talking about climate change and let alone other environmental crises for more than 3 decades, and things have gotten much worse.
So we know that capitalism has ripped the natural world apart and has failed to mend it back together. An eco-socialist planned economy, then, is a necessary intervention if we are to truly heal the rift between human economies and the natural world. But what exactly do those eco-socialist futures look like? Imagine a world where you don't feel forced to go to your job just to put food on the table, where climate collapse isn't driving every global disaster. A world where decisions about what products get made, what public goods are free and accessible, are carried out by everyday people, not by CEOs and board members. A world where community and chosen family are just a bike ride, a high-speed train, or a quick walk away. Living under capitalism, it's easy to feel like these visions are unrealistic or even utopian. We know that capitalism isn't working for us and for the planet, but it's hard to imagine an alternative. We're caught between understanding the destructive logic of capitalism and struggling to engage with viable alternatives. Perhaps that's part of capitalism's plan. As author and educator Ashley C. Ford writes, the goal of oppressors is to limit your imagination about what is possible without them, so you might never imagine more for yourself in the world you live in. This is why we need vibrant visions and debates, not just about the destruction of capitalism, not just about how we get to an ecological zero-carbon world, but also about what that world looks like when we get there. Drew Pendergrass and Troy Vitesse's book, Half-Earth Socialism, is an excellent example of envisioning a socialist ecological future. Addressing the sixth mass extinction, the threat of global pandemics, and the climate crisis, Half-Earth Socialism calls for a socialist planned economy that hinges on the key parameters of land preservation, minimizing emissions, and a good life for all, rather than what markets normally plan around: monetary costs and profits. More concretely, Vitesse and Pendergrass call for a half-earth socialism that uses linear programming methods to set broad-scale goals like veganism, energy quotas, and forest rewilding and stewardship under indigenous control. Pendergrass notes,
"We can imagine feasible ways to use simple algorithms to plan plausible ways of organizing society, and then debate about what those plans look like on various levels. So we kind of imagine a little federalism where we set broad, coarse goals at a large level, and then figure out in detail what that looks like as you go towards the more local level."
In the context of climate change, socialist planning is crucial because it lets us understand exactly what we need to do at all levels. As Vitesse argues,
okay, someone's vegan or someone has a Tesla, someone doesn't fly, they're great, but what is actually necessary? And I think when you're in a market, this is super opaque and one really has no idea.
He goes on to add that with a planning model,
then you begin to think, okay, like how much energy can we use as a society, or where are we getting our energy from? How much land are we using with animal agriculture? How much of that land could be rewilded? You begin to see these things in their totality, which is difficult to do or impossible to do under capitalism.
The reality is that any ecological socialist society will have trade-offs. To dramatically downscale the economy, to preserve half of the world's ecosystems in a decolonial way, while also redistributing wealth and energy to everyone in the world, countries, and especially the rich in the imperial core, will certainly have to cut down on production and consumption. In the last chapter of their book, Vitesse and Pendergrass reveal what this might look like through the idea of the Gosplan, an algorithmic planning tool that reveals the trade-offs that must be made in order to reach an ecological sound society. Drawing on the work of prior planning theorists and the power and capacity of new planning and modeling systems like climate models, the authors envision a central planning tool called Gosplan. Using linear programming algorithms, which are already used throughout a lot of the business world, Gosplan would spit out broad plans depending on which parameters are emphasized. For example, if we very simplistically input that we want to cut emissions by 7.6% every year, rewild 25% more land, while maintaining a global good life, all by 2030, the Gosplan might spit out a variety of plans ranging from more lenient energy quotas, but faster uptake of vegetarian or vegan production and consumption. Or perhaps it might spit out a plan with more aggressive rewilding and afforestation instead, or a more rapid increase in renewable production. Essentially, it would mean thousands of planners and scientists would plug a massive amount of data into Gosplan and model course blueprints 5, 10, or even 25 years into the future, projecting what it would look like to cut emissions, rewild half the planet, and redistribute wealth at different speeds. And crucially, those broad plans would be disseminated, debated, and transformed as they pass through global, national, and local levels. In the last chapter of the book, we get a brief glimpse of that future as fictional local Massachusetts planner Edith explains,
"The folks down in Havana have made a few different plans for the next year, assuming different energy quotas, ensuring in each plan that nature is always respected and no one is left behind. Plan 5F is the most austere, keeping consumption at about 750 watts per person, which includes all of the industrial production and social services required to keep society running. For us," she continued, "Plan 5F means we can let a lot of pasture return to wilderness rather than planting more of those terrible biofuel plantations."
Throughout the chapter, the characters debate the various plans constantly, because for eco-socialist planning to succeed, it must be in constant motion. It must be intensely transparent, understandable, accessible, and subject to debate. Plans must come from everyone, be formulated and run through modeling tools like the fictional Gosplan, and then sent back to the masses in an endless cycle of construction and exploration. But Pendergrass and Vitesse are just two thinkers in a vast world of eco-socialist ideas. There are other visions, like those of Max Isle, wherein greenbelts surround all cities as popular planning converts sprawling suburbs into farm swards. High-speed trains link bigger cities to smaller ones to capillary lines, leading to outlying gentrifying hamlets. Isle's world prioritizes anti-imperialism and state sovereignty in the periphery. Ultimately, as Max Isle writes, ecosocialism aspires to egalitarian redistribution, public ownership of the means of production, respectful, modest, and humane management of the human interaction with non-human nature, and decommodification of social life globally, not merely locally. And it aspires to eliminate capitalism not merely locally, but globally. And it is explicitly anti-imperialist and pro-third world state sovereignty.
We need a solution that attacks the problem at the root, first of all, and that also does not restrict itself to looking at a reconstruction of the United States and Europe, but also looks towards the global south, towards Latin America, towards Africa, towards Asia.
Isle's vision seeks to mend the metabolic rift of capitalism by shrinking the distance between urban production and rural land, ending a system of extraction and embracing one of replenishment. Ideas that even Karl Marx was writing about a century and a half before. Marx writes that it's not enough to just liberate the worker. For a truly just and liberated society, we must also heal our broken relationship with the land, arguing that communal land ownership, communism, is the only way to heal the metabolic rift. As eco-socialist scholars John Bellamy Foster and Brett Clark write, for Marx, the only lasting path to sustainability is the conscious and rational treatment of the land as permanent communal property, or in other words, the abolition of private landed property. Ecological sustainability is only a possibility in a future society of associated producers, a socialist society, which could bring about a new and higher synthesis, a union of agriculture and industry. Meanwhile, authors at the Red Nation argue for an indigenous-led global eco-socialism.
Restoring land to indigenous caretakers is a necessary step towards ensuring any kind of future on this planet. That future must be, in my opinion, socialist.
One that foregrounds stewardship, an end to colonial occupation everywhere, and an emphasis on mass action and non-reformist reforms from below right now.
But we're very serious about a revolutionary struggle and what it means to build a political program for that type of revolution. And as Indigenous people, we think that our environmental justice struggles and our struggles for climate justice must also be responsive to the demands for abolition, and divesting from those institutions, we must reinvest in the common dignity of all, which means healing our bodies and healing our earth.
They call for radical acts that weaken capitalist structures today, while also building power to topple settler colonial capitalism in the future. This looks like immediate defunding of police, immigration, and military forces, free sustainable housing, education, healthcare, and mental health services, enforcement of treaty rights, reinvesting in care work alongside land, air, and water restoration. The Red Deal is a crucial intervention into eco-socialist visions. It shows that while it's important to have future visions to hold on to, the climate crisis, capitalism, and colonialism are destroying life and land right now, especially within oppressed communities. So we need serious harm prevention immediately. In the words of the Red Nation, we cannot simply build isolated utopias while the rest of the world burns. Nor can we wait for the slow process of reformist reform to kick in. We cannot simply heal our individual trauma, nor can we consume better to save the environment. We cannot vote harder and place all of our hope in a few individuals in Congress. Climate change will kill us before any of these strategies liberate the planet from capitalism. Despite their differences, communal stewardship, rational and ecological production, and anti-imperialism are all through lines throughout these eco-socialist manifestos. However, these visions of eco-socialism are just that, visions and blueprints, imagined realities to hold on to as we chart the path towards ecological and political transition. But there are real-world instances, however flawed, of eco-socialism in action. And the shining star among them lies in the heart of the Caribbean, battered on all sides by imperial pressure. Nestled within Havana's concrete skyline lie green rows of luscious vegetables, an organic urban farm. Here in Organoponico La Sazon, cooperative workers tend to the many rows of raised beds that feed their neighbors and surrounding city. La Sazon, a full-scale organic farm with minimal chemical and fossil fuel inputs, is not an outlier in Havana. It's the norm. But Cuban agriculture wasn't always like this. Cuba's unique history forged this organic system through hardship and struggle. For most of the first half of the 20th century, Cuban agriculture was heavily industrialized. Monocrops of sugarcane sugarcane coated the countryside as Cuba was forced to produce sugar for its imperial colonizer, the United States. But after thrusting off the weight of imperialist forces in 1959 with a triumphant socialist revolution, Cuba was ready for change. However, much of Cuban agriculture was still tooled towards high fossil fuel import and high monoculture output. Up until the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba still mainly grew sugar and traded exclusively with the Soviets for staples such as rice, wheat, tractors, and gas. But this system was dramatically upended in 1991. When the Soviet Union unraveled and the imperial core maintained its trade embargo on Cuba, the country was left isolated from oil, staple foods, and mechanized farming systems like tractors that had long been the cornerstone of their farms. As a result, Cuba entered what was deemed the special period. Journalist and author Bill McKibben writes that in 1989, the average Cuban was eating about 3,000 calories per day. By 1992, that plummeted to 1,900 calories per day. In short, Cuba was starving because their semi-industrialized agricultural system was ripped out from under them, and imperialist sanctions left them no other option but to look inward for a solution. And the forces and organization of socialist production bore them out of the crisis. Now, on the other end of such a brutal crisis born out of imperialist aggression, Cuba has transformed. In Havana alone, its residents converted 35,000 hectares or 135 square miles of land into agriculturally productive space, which is about the same as converting the area of 6 Manhattans into farming space. But Havana is just a small part of Cuba's socialist agricultural revolution. Isolated from almost all trading partners, Cubans either had to adapt or starve. Through plans like Campesino a Campesino, or farmer-to-farmer knowledge sharing, as well as urban farming initiatives, Cuba pulled itself out of the depths of industrial, fossil fuel-intensive agriculture and built a socialist agriculture that dramatically decreased emissions output while prioritizing food access. They moved from monocultures growing commodities to farms growing food. In the 1980s, Cuba had more tractors per hectare than California, but by the 2000s, tractors were quickly replaced by over 400,000 oxen teams. Monocultures were replanted with polycultures, crop diversity was valued for its ability to decrease pest pressure and encourage healthy soil. Fossil fuel-reliant techniques were replaced with sustainable and permaculture-oriented systems. Organoponicos, or the Cuban term for urban garden, proliferated widely, using raised beds to grow healthy plants on poisoned urban soil. Crucial to this regenerative farming explosion was the Campesino a Campesino, or farmer-to-farmer movement. The goal of this movement was for small farmers to share knowledge with each other and integrate new sustainable systems of agriculture through social participation, mobilizing local resources, and reverting to traditional peasant know-how. This grassroots knowledge building meant that, as Aidan Ratchford writes, many small farmers were producing 80 to 100% of food necessary for family consumption by 2011. And a cooperative, Jagüey Grande, for example, produces 80% of food needs for the 60,000 residents of its municipality. By purposefully placing the needs of the people, like good healthy soil, accessible food, and control over what to grow, instead of emphasizing growing for commodity sale, like selling sugarcane to multinational corporations, Cuba has successfully built an eco-socialist agriculture. Ratchford goes on to write, a country previously reliant on imports for 90% of its food was able to feed itself through urban, organic agriculture. This movement represents the largest conversion from conventional to alternative organic agriculture in the world's history. Cuba reveals the possibilities of an eco-socialist degrowth future right now, especially when it comes to agriculture. It not only is deepening the connection between its people and land through agroecological and urban farming cooperatives, but it's done so while increasing literacy, food access, and minimizing fossil fuel use. While by no means the end goal, Cuba's form of socialist organization represents an eco-socialist degrowth in action. They're shortening the distance between factory and field, between humans and the natural world. But Cuba is constantly battered on all sides by the forces of capitalism. In order for eco-socialism to take root, it must spread out in all directions and across the globe. And to achieve that, we need a plan. Whether it was the US in 1776, Haiti in 1791, Russia in 1917, or Cuba in 1959, revolutions have always been the engines of change. The destruction of capitalism will continue ever onward until we actively disrupt it. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet solution to achieving an eco-socialist economy. It will only come about from the long collective struggle of the working class and peasants taking control of production. This may happen peacefully or involve violence, especially if the capitalist elite are heavily entrenched in the cycle of capital accumulation, like those in the United States. But most likely, this revolution will begin in the periphery, in countries like India and the Philippines, where there are already thriving communist revolutions attempting to build power. For most of the rest of the world, unfortunately, the conditions of capitalist state backlash against the left make global eco-socialism seem too far away, especially if we want to address urgent environmental needs. We need rapid ecological action within the next 10 years. And unfortunately, a global eco-socialist revolution doesn't seem likely within that timeframe. So we cannot rely solely on the prospect of global eco-socialism to address climate action. Instead, we will need to work within our current system right now, while simultaneously striving for a more rationally planned ecological economy. As Brazilian eco-socialist activist Sabrina Fernandes writes, to escape the looming ecological disaster before we have the chance to establish a socialist society, we will have to implement ideas, policies, microsystems, reforms, and other socio-political arrangements that will slow the pace of the crisis while establishing the foundations for popular power that can overcome it and support a new system. These interventions can range from building union power and pushing for more worker agency in the workplace, or seeking support for more urban and agroecological farming methods. It can involve organizing communities to advocate for safe, accessible, and electrified public transit, as well as developing extensive bike infrastructure. It can mean blocking or sabotaging pipelines across indigenous land, or it can mean defunding the military and police. Pendergrass points towards the recent United Auto Workers strike as another example of immediate social and environmental harm reduction.
One of the things they're demanding is a 4-day work week because they recognize that the transition to electric vehicles requires less labor.
But in the process of fighting for those stopgap interventions, it is crucial not to lose sight of the larger goal. These are harm reduction strategies and will forever be beholden to the whims of capitalist production if we don't continue to escalate towards eco-socialist democratic planning. The goal is to build an ecological transition that will make the socialist transition possible. Only through the complete dismantling of capitalist forces, a feat historically achieved through revolution, will we finally be able to embark on the journey of constructing and planning an ecological and ethical world for all. Luckily, we won't be starting from scratch on that journey. Socialism, and more specifically socialist planning, has been tried and tested in China, Cuba, and especially the Soviet Union. It's crucial to learn from the successes and, importantly, the failures of those planning methods, which is why I've made a whole nother video about the ecological implications of Soviet planning. The Bolsheviks successfully protected over 4 million hectares of land by 1929, which is available right now exclusively on the creator-owned streaming service Nebula. There, you can also watch the full hour and 20-minute long interview with the authors of Half-Earth Socialism, alongside over 25 bonus and extended OCC videos. And when you're done watching those videos, you can check out a whole host of exclusive content from creators you love, like the new Nebula Plus video from Climate Town, giving you a behind-the-scenes sneak peek of how their videos get made.
We've got all the shit shot, it's all in the computer, I got all my media in there.
Or Wendover Productions' recent Nebula original on the logistics and demise of coal mining in the United States.
And currently, there are no plans to develop any future utility-scale coal-fired power plants.
And right now, I have an exclusive deal for my viewers. If you sign up for Nebula using the link on screen or in the description, you can get 40% off the annual plan, which is just $2.50 a month. Signing up for Nebula is one of the best ways to support our changing climate. And in the process, you can watch my videos a month early, get access to all my ad-free exclusive videos, and support a blossoming collective of educational creators.